Hello and welcome to yet another installment of Pastor's Ponderings. I'm happy to be with you today as we look at some of the basic vestments that you may see as part of our liturgical life and worship at Trinity and in other churches across Christendom. What I'm wearing now is actually called a habit. Some people refer to them as clerics. But what Pastor David and I, you see us in quite a bit, is really an evolution of a habit that came into being from back well before, say, 300 within the church, 300 AD. These were typical vestments that you'd see people wearing in public life, particularly in Rome, is where I'm going to base this out of. And this is called a cassock. The cassock was kind of the normal piece of clothing that you'd put on every day, and you kind of went from there. Christians around that era, especially those in clergy ranks, tended to wear black. It was a color that associated with the poor, and it tried to stay away from anything too filled with bling or pizzazz. As time has gone on, especially in the last 100 years, the cassock has been replaced by, you can see, a black shirt and black pants, a little more functional for getting around these days. But the cassock was the basic document or the basic vestment that you put on in the morning from the church. Somewhere around the 500s or 600s, cassocks started to shorten in Rome, but the Christians living there at the time weren't quite sure they liked the idea of too much skin hanging out below the knees, so we decided to stay in the long vestment, even though the culture was now running with a much shorter habit that might come a little higher on the leg. So to this day, it's not uncommon to see cassocks being worn by Christian clergy persons, and oftentimes it's migrated to be kind of a shirt and pants all in black, as the color would be. When it got cold, sometimes you could get heavyweight cassocks. They may even be fur-lined historically for the sake of providing warmth that you'd need. So you may have a lightweight and a heavyweight. The next thing that you put over a cassock would be much like we do today when we go out in the wintertime and we put a coat on. This is called a cope. This one in particular is called a copa nigra, black cope. You can see that it is just an outer garment that you'd hang over your shoulders, and its length would be there. Every once in a while kids want to borrow this for the sake of Halloween, but we don't lend it out for such. But you can see that. It's nice to wear at a cemetery, for example, in the winter months when it's a little cooler. This here is, again, another cope. As you can see, you're probably familiar with this from Easter and Christmas and other festival liturgies. Again, it's a festival cope that we wear as decoration for the sake of saying that we're celebrating something today. Historically, these would be worn as an outer garment over top of a cassock at a time of celebration. The cope here that we're looking at is a festival cope. You can see it has some embroidery and some nice Christian imagery there to show that when that comes out, it's usually something of a greater celebration or solemnity or a festival of the church. When one would be ready for worship, then one would have to put something over one's cassock. These would be outer garments. When we're inside, oftentimes we put on an alb. It comes from the word albus, which is Latin for white. And it was a simple vestment that went over the cassock, as we still do today. Pastor David and myself oftentimes, well, always, under this, have our contemporary cassock on. This alb comes over top. It's white. It's a symbol of purity within the church, a baptismal garment reminiscent of all that. And then this would be the garment that probably from the 300s or 400s on, Christian liturgical worship leaders, often clergy, would put the alb on over the cassock. This here is called a cincture. These historically were all pullovers. They were kind of a lightweight linen. You just kind of pull them over like a big sack with a hole in the top of it. As time went on, they became tailored, kind of to fit the different sizes of pastors and priests that were wearing them, and deacons. Because they were kind of large in their day, there was a cincture that would go around them. This is one that Pastor David uses usually. This is one that I bring with me that is mine. You can see one's a little different. These have knots on them. They'd be more connected to the monastic traditions of the church. These would be considered more of the cathedral traditions of the church with more decorative tassels on them. You'll usually see those hanging out. They really function as a belt to help keep the longer the longer white alb from tripping us as we walk around, and it helps to pull it in. Those were in vogue for the longest of whiles. Somewhere around the 1300s, around Rome, surplices came into use, especially up north when you got farther away from Rome itself, but out of Italy over into France and other areas. The surplice became kind of a common vestment, again, for worship, that would overlay the cassock. These were more flowing garments. Oftentimes, they didn't require a cincture or a band to help tie it in. As time has gone on, with liturgical renewal in the 1970s, these albs had kind of fallen out of style for a while in some places, but they made a comeback. Some may remember my predecessor, Pastor Tome, frequently was found wearing a surplice. This was the vestment that came into use in the church maybe in the 1200s and persisted through maybe 1900s and mid-20th century. Oftentimes we'll see those used at prayer services that are not Eucharistic. These become a Eucharistic vestment in a way that's then overlaid for worship by a chancel. We'll talk about this some other time. Do notice that some albs have decoration on them. Down toward the bottom, you see some embroidery here. This one does not have that, but you can see that it's not inappropriate. There was actually a time in the church when oftentimes albs had lace into the sleeves, kind of like an old lace tablecloth that you might see in your grandmother's house. And these would be very decorated garments. So that's what we continue to wear and to use. The surplice, or the cassock itself, takes us back to maybe the 400s or so. And then we can come right through the ages to today as we continue to vest for worship. So it's good to share these vestments with you and a little bit of background of their history.